I don't see anybody yet. Oh, here we go. Okay.
That was like the voice on high coming through.
Oh, I don't want to be there. Hold on. Okay, I'm coming back. This is not right. Okay, here we are. Okay, there we go. Okay. So let's see. Looks like, okay. All right, I can see everybody. Ah, Steve is here. Okay, great.
Yeah, but I'll have to leave in a few minutes for another Zoom meeting.
Okay, good to see you though. Glad you made it. Okay, guys.
I had the wrong code in my phone, so I was sitting there waiting for the meeting to start.
Yeah, everybody had it wrong. It wasn't listed right. It wasn't your fault. It was all wrong. I'm gonna mute everybody and start talking. If you want to say something, wave at me. That'll work. Oh, geez. Okay. All right. Great. I see everybody. Make it big. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. It was nice to have a decent day today, to at least to go outside a little bit, you know. We went for a walk. It was like, oh my God, a walk. And took my doggies went nuts. I took them into town, you know. I don't want them to know that route, so it made me nervous because they're incorrigible. But I took them anyway. They run like mice. And it was just swell to be outside a little bit and did some teaching and this and that. So we manage our time the best we can. You know, I wrote some things and I'm going to pull up a screen here to show you something we can start with. And maybe we'll see if you can see it. This will be interesting if I can actually get this to happen. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Oh, this is not going to happen. Share screen. Well, never mind about that. I guess I don't know how to get it. Gosh, I feel bad about that, but let's see what's on here. Oh man. Oh my. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm not going to do that screen. All right. I can't. I don't know how to get it. I'm sorry to say. I'll just have to ask him next time I get his attention. Okay, can you hear me? All right. I'm completely messed up here with this. So I'm just not gonna pay any attention to it. Okay, I thought I could put a text up here, but I can't figure out how to do that. So I'm gonna talk you through it. So there's a couple of things that we should talk about tonight. First is we begin the book of Leviticus this week, which is always significant to me. Vayikra. There's so much to talk about when we begin the book of Leviticus, the Parsha this week. And of course, everything seems more significant now, don't you think? Everything has extra meaning, more valence, VALENCE. And also tonight is the new moon of the month of Nisan. Really significant. The new moon is always an interesting thing. Especially the month of Nisan, because we're taught that that's when the world was created, was the new moon of Nisan. It's the first month. We're taught in the Torah that it's the first month, Nisan. We count Nisan as month number 1. So in Nisan, Passover, we get Passover and it's our first month because we're somewhat on an agricultural calendar, somewhat, not entirely, but. So you would expect the first month to be spring month, Nisan, and that's what it is. So we had a celebration of the first of the month, the first of the new moon. You know, when the new moon was sighted, somebody would blow the shofar. And there was some sort of celebration about it, some sort of commemoration of the new moon. But you don't really see the new moon. So there was an argument in the Talmud about when you could make the blessings on the new moon and whether you should make them at all. There was one opinion in the Talmud I thought that was really interesting that said, it's a natural thing. Why make a blessing? It happens. Like as if the implication was, if you don't make blessings over stuff, they don't happen. That cracked me up. But there is an opinion in the Talmud. Why make a blessing? It happens. It's nature. I thought that was so great. So where it's discussed, it's discussed quite a bit in tractate Sanhedrin, a really interesting tractate. So I'm going to read you a paragraph from it. It talks about this new moon. Said Rabbi Acha bar Chanina in the name of Rabbi Asi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, reciting the blessing over the moon at the proper time is like greeting the Shekhinah personally. This is a very heavy thing. So when you make the blessing over the new moon, it's like you're saying hello to the Shekhinah, the inner presence, the quiet presence of godliness. Reciting the blessing over the moon at the proper time. And that becomes the subject of discussion. You know, when you read the Talmud, you move in and out of literal, figurative, imagistic, literal. Like each line one line can be literal, the next line can be entirely metaphorical or imagistic or symbolic. So it's interesting to read the Talmud this way and try to figure out who's speaking from what place. It's much like being in a class. The Talmud's much like somebody set a tape recorder down in a classroom and they just recorded everything, because whenever you're in a classroom, you have different minds at work, even the classes that you all are familiar with. One person is going to say, oh, this is a historical thing or an anthropological thing. Somebody else is going to think metaphorically and imagistically. Somebody else is going to think mystically. Somebody else is going to think entirely literally. And it can happen in the course of a conversation. One person says one thing, another person says that, and you think they're talking to each other, and they kind of are talking to each other, but they're also speaking different languages. And it's like that in the Talmud. So it was taught in the school of Rabbi Ishmael, if the Israelites were privileged to greet their Father in heaven once a month, that would be enough for them, said Abaya. Therefore, we should say the blessing standing up as though we're greeting God, because it says we're greeting God. We welcome the Shekhinah, we should say the blessing standing up. That's why when we turn in the end of L'chadodi to the door, we're greeting the Shekhinah. When we sing L'chadodi, the last verse, can you hear this? בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצור חולה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. Come on in, O bride, come on in, O bride. We're talking to Shekhinah, and we stand. L'chadodi l'krat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi l'krat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצור חולה, תוך אמונה עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לחדודי לקראת חלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לחדודי לקראת חלה, בני שבת נקבלה. So we stand to greet the bride, who's the queen, who's the Shekhinah, the inner presence of godliness. We stand for that. So it says in that passage in the Talmud that they stood when they said the prayer, and then it says that they stood on each other's shoulders or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it means. The word shoulders is used. It may mean they stood on each other's shoulders. It may mean they kind of held each other up. It may mean they leaned on each other. I'm not sure what it means. So who was it? It was, said Abaya, we should say the blessing standing up because we're greeting God. And then Mary Mar and Mar Zutra went so far as to climb up on one another's shoulders. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it means. Climb up on one another's shoulders while saying the blessing, or they supported each other. Sometimes it's translated, or they held each other up. I'm not quite sure what it means. Now, who are these guys that we're talking about this in Sanhedrin? Well, they're mostly Babylonian rabbis. That means they're speaking in the academies of Babylonia. They're called Amoraim, Amora, Aramaic word, Amora, to speak, those who spoke. So there was a couple of big academies in Babylonia that were founded in the 3rd century CE. that we had communities in Babylonia. So, but some of the people who left Palestine left because they thought they were going home to Babylonia. We had a Babylonian exile centuries before, so we were familiar with Babylonia. But then when the Romans turned up the heat on us, a lot of us went to Babylonia, and we recreated Jewish life there in Babylonia in the Roman period, after the Roman period. So there were two great academies that were founded there. One was called Sura. In English, it's S-U-R-A. That was founded by a guy named Abba Arika, which means, he must have been tall, long daddy Abba Arika, tall guy. He was also called Rav. He must have been a great teacher. They just called him Rav. And he was a disciple of Yehuda HaNasi. Yehuda HaNasi was Palestinian Tana, an earlier generation of rabbis, the most authoritative. And he was the one, Yehuda HaNasi, who compiled the Mishnah together. He put the Mishnah together in Israel and Palestine. So, but his disciple was Abba Arika, and when he went to Babylonia, he founded an academy. In Babylonia, these academies were called, they were yeshivas, but they used the word yeshiva in Aramaic as metivta. You'll find still some teaching combines these days called metivta. I think there was a well-known one in Los Angeles that copied the Babylonian yeshiva name. I thought clever thing to do to honor the learning in exile, call something metivta, honors learning in exile. So there was a head of the yeshiva in Israel who had been called Rosh Yeshiva. In Babylonia, they called him Reish Metivta, the Aramaic, the head of the yeshiva. And the head of the yeshiva was his assistant was called the Reish Kala, a Kala. That's where Kala comes from. Kala is a gathering of people for learning. And they describe for us, there's a really nice description from one of the later rabbis, 10th century, I believe, who describes to us what it was like, what they had, how you walked in and all this. And one of the interesting things I saw in the description of these yeshivas, these metivtas in Babylonia, was they had a garden, and they had a garden for they grew their own food in these yeshivas. And when they had these kalas, people would stay there a long time. They would spend weeks there. So they had kalas, according to this one tradition, twice a year. They had it once in the month of Adar, which we just finished, so it'd be right before spring. And they had one in Elul, right before the high holidays, right before Tishrei. So when Rav arrived, he came to a place near Sura. He found there was no Torah learning there, so he founded a Metivta yeshiva. And there was another guy that was kind of like his I don't know what you call him. I don't think they were competitors, but they're often spoken of together. One had one opinion and the other had another opinion. And Rav was the head of one of the Metivtas, and Shmuel is his name, was the head of the other Metivta. And they were kind of like Hillel and Shammai. They disagreed on a lot of things. They had kind of different versions of things. Rav and Shmuel, they're often mentioned together. And they really demonstrated that principle of one speaking kind of literally and one speaking another way. I'll give you an interesting example. And the one that Shmuel was the head of the yeshiva, head of the Metivta, was called Pumbedita. which today I think is Fallujah, by the way, interestingly enough. But I read an account of a soldier, a Jewish chaplain that was in Fallujah, and he was looking for footprints. Couldn't find any, no footprints at all. But Pumbedita was Fallujah. So supposedly, Rav founded that surah yeshiva in 225 CE, 3rd century, 225. And it went on until like 1033, supposedly. And that was the era when it was founded, is the beginning of the era of the Amoraim. So there was some well-known teachers there. I mean, in those yeshivas, they were very prominent. They all over the Talmud. Rav Huna, Rav Chisda, Rav Ashi, Gaons. Gaon is a very elevated title. Yehuda Gaon, Natronai Gaon, Saja Gaon. So I'm always interested in try to imagine, what it was like in those places, and pretty much it's in the discussions in those places that the Talmud comes from. They recorded their arguments and they wrote them down. They collected them into the Talmud, and that's why so much of the Talmud is in Aramaic. So in their account of the blessing of the moon, they said that the blessing was, I think it was, they said in the West. When they say in the West, it means in Israel and Palestine. They call it in the West because, they're in Babylonia. They said in the West, the prayer was Baruch Mechadesh Chodashim, Mechadesh, blessed is the one who renews Chodashim, the moons. Because Chodesh and Chadesh, same root. It's one of the words for moons is new, because the moon waxes and wanes. So we had one blessing when it wanes and another blessing when it waxes. So you had a blessing when it waxes, when it starts to plump, I call it, is renewing the moon, because you can see it's getting renewed. But when it starts to fade, when it waxes, there was a different blessing, and it's a blessing for like when you hear hard things, difficult things, because you're kind of you're attached to something that is receding, and the different blessing, Hatov Hamitiv Hatov, who does good and makes good happen. Racha Racha Mecha, the one who does good. Ve'amirachi Atov Kilo Chalu Racha Racha Mecha Ve'amirachi Ki lo tamu, ki lo tamu, כי לא תמו חסדיך מעולם, קיווינו לה. מעולם, קיווינו לה. The one who does good. Hatov, the one who does good, may never remove those blessings, the rachamim, the kindnesses. May that one never remove those kindnesses. So there was this in that place in the Talmud when they're discussing these blessings on the new moon. One of the rabbis, Ravina, I think is the one. He says it's nature, so you don't bless. It waxes and wanes according to its nature. So you see how you have such different mindsets here, you know? One mindset seems to be attached to the coming and the going of the moon, like some kind of magical thing, you know, you say the blessing, a different blessing when it's waxing, a different blessing when it's waning. And another one says, no, it's nature. It's, it happens independent. What's the purpose of such a blessing? So one of the things that we do on the new moon, though, is we make the prayer of the greeting, which is so old for us, Shalom Aleichem. You know, Shalom Aleichem, and welcoming the angels, like we do on Friday night. And that becomes part of the customs of the new moon. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Ashari. Malachi Elyon, Malachi Harachamim. Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. U'achem l'shalom. Malachi Shalom. Malachi Elyon, Malachi Harachamim. Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Notice in this song, in this text, I think the whole text turns on a preposition. Shalom Aleichem, peace, Shalom Aleichem to you. The response is always, you know, Aleichem Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi. Malachi Asharet, O messengers of angels of mercy, helping, accompanying angels. Malachi Elyon, angels up high. Malachi, this is the Safari version. The text is a little bit different. Angels of Rachamim, that same word I just used in the other song, of giving, pure giving, of mercy. Angels of mercy. Oh, the angels of mercy are not departed, nor are they gone. The angels of mercy. Mi melech malachi hamelachim. Then the next verse. Boachem, come in. Boachem, come in. When you come in, Boachem le shalom. Le is preposition to, toward. And every verse has that in it. You come in toward peace. You don't sit. It's the same argument in the Talmud. There's an argument about when you leave somebody's presence, when you say tata, that you sign off with somebody with bishalom or lishalom. Bishalom, another, can you hear the difference? I'm not sure how good this microphone is. Bishalom, means like you're kind of in place with it. So when you say goodbye to somebody, you say, I'm in peace, I'm in peace, bishalom. In the Talmud, somebody says, no. When you leave somebody, you say lishalom, because peace is a condition that we haven't achieved. We're always moving toward it. It's always a toward shalom. We say lishalom. So that's how people signed off on letters for generations. And those who didn't know this argument would sign bishalom. But those who knew this argument would always sign lishalom, that we're moving toward peace. This kind of notion is always an aspiration, always an aspiration. It'd be chutzpahdik to think that we sit in this condition. We're always aspiring for it. And that's what's in this text of this tune. When you come in, boachem lishalom. Next verse is Barchuni, bless us. Barchuni le shalom, toward peace. Last verse, Seitchem, when you leave, Seitchem le shalom, toward peace. Mi melech malchei hamelachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I love this melody too. I think it's the finest melody. It's very similar, by the way, to a very famous Sephardic folk song. Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, brava en el cielo y en la estrella, vida una luz santa en la judería que había de nacer Abraham Avinu. Cuando el rey Nimrod, when the king Nimrod went riding, al campo salim, he looked into the sky, en la judería, and over the Jewish quarter. Vida una luz santa, he saw a holy light, en la judería, over the Jewish quarter, que había de nacer, that told of the coming of, the birth of Abraham Avinu, account of the birth of Abraham, our ancestor. Then it has a little funny little chorus. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, dear Father, Padre bendito, blessed Father, luz, light of Israel. It's basically the same tune, but slowed way down, you know. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi HaSharim, Malachi Elyon, Malachi HaRachamim, Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That way, it's one of my favorite tunes. I heard it from a guy in Brooklyn many years ago who sang it real fast, like the folk song. it didn't work for me. But I took it way down, and I thought it was so beautiful like that. So we sing that on the new moon, the Shalom Aleichem. That's how we greet each other. We go outside. We do this little ceremony outside. We say Shalom Aleichem. We look at the moon. We make a blessing. And I read this poem. This is called A Blessing on the New Moon. I'll read it and then I'll try to interpret it. Master of mirrors, let me see with the unclear mirror the dark images, the images discerned at night by moonlight. God of the light and the dark, release me from distractions. Bind me to the deep story, the right words, not the simple words, not the easy ones, not the sweet words. I want the true ones. God of the waxing and waning, don't sweet talk me. Draw me into the deep. Carry me in your pocket. Sling me like a satchel over your shoulder. Let the truth plump like the moon, the dark moon, the dark candle, the candle at the hearth with all its shadows. It's the moon. It's the moon, the dark candle, the reflected dark, dark, dark light. So that's an interesting poem. Let's see what I can make sense of it. Mirrors. Mirrors is a nice image for this poet. It's probably the image of Espeklaria that appears a lot in the Talmud. And Espeklaria is a mirror, sometimes cloudy, sometimes clear. And it's connected to like prophecy or Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which are two different things. Prophecy is supposedly higher, but not always. Because Ruach HaKodesh is the Holy Spirit. But prophecy is like what the prophets did. Thus said God, So they were a mouthpiece. That's what prophecy is. Prophecy of of our ancestors, when prophecy existed, was a technical thing. It was a prophet was speaking the words of God. A prophet was a mouthpiece. Navi is a mouthpiece. So the prophet spoke words of God. Ruach HaKodesh is a different thing, though. Holy Spirit is something that comes from a person. Person is inspired, or you get inspiration. Ruach HaKodesh, you're not speaking the words of God, though. You're speaking your words, though they're elevated, but they're your words. So in most cases, prophecy is a higher trip. But there are a bunch of our ancestors that thought that Ruach HaKodesh was the higher trip. One of them being Ramban, Nachmanides, who lived after Maimonides, next century. Spanish Kabbalistic guy. Really interesting. He thought that Ruach HaKodesh was higher because you got this thing happening inside you and it brings out the best in you. Brings out something creative, something that your best response. That's Ruach HaKodesh, and that's even higher than prophecy. So I think in this piece here, Master of Mirrors, I think mirrors comes from this notion of Espeklaria. Are we talking about the clear mirror, the cloudy mirror, these levels of inspiration. So with the moon is this waxing and waning thing. It's not like prophecy. It's more like nature, like the controversy between what do you say, a blessing? It's nature. Let me see with the unclear mirror. That's Espeklaria is often described this way, sometimes cloudy, sometimes clear. Let me see with the unclear mirror the dark images, the images discerned at night by moonlight. Because remember, one of the problems about identifying, making the blessing on the new moon was, when is it? You don't see it. You don't actually see it. So God of the light and dark. So this is given over to what the moon represents. It represents the accumulation of light and then the receding of light as it waxes or wanes. Release me from distractions, bind me to the deep story, the right words, not the simple words, because when you're making a blessing, when it's dark, you need to go deeper. You need to go deeper. Not the simple words, not the easy ones, not the sweet words. I want the true ones. This is something you really got to dive for. God of the waxing and waning, don't sweet talk me. I don't want the simple stuff. I don't want the cute stuff. Draw me into the deep. Carry me in your pocket. This is an image from Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda. Zelda used to say that to Scott Fitzgerald. She said, I want to live in your pocket. Carry me in your pocket. Sling me like a satchel over your shoulder. Let the truth plump like the moon. That's what happens when the moon starts to appear and plump. The dark moon, the dark candle. This is an image from the Zohar, the dark candle. The Zohar is this way of describing darkness in a meditation on a candle. So there's a passage in the Zohar, the classic text of Jewish mysticism, that somebody seems to be staring into a candle. And they're describing the wick of the candle. You know what? You ever stared into a wick of a candle closely? You notice that right around the wick is a darkness, and then there's like a blue, and then there's a flame. You know what I mean? But right at the wick is dark. So in this meditation, this contemplation in the Zohar, someone is looking at the burning candle and notices there's this darkness in the flame, and it's right in the center of the flame. And it becomes a metaphor for, I guess you'd say, for one concept and not two concepts. Not light and dark, but light and this space around, it's in the flame. And the Zohar calls that the dark candle, as if to say, it's all light, all over. It's all light. Even the dark in that light is light. The Zohar calls it the dark candle. Now the Zohar is a really metaphorical, imagistic imagination. Do you hear that? The impact of that? The dark candle. It's all light, all over. But that space is referred to as the dark candle. So it acknowledges it, but it doesn't give it independent existence. So it has lots of implications. That's what this dark candle is, image from the Zohar. The candle at the hearth with all its shadows. I don't know about that line. I think it's not so good. It's the moon. It's the moon. This is what the moon does with its waxing and waning. It ascends and it descends in light. The dark candle is often dark. That reflected light that the moon is, it's dark, dark, dark. Then it goes light. It's an interesting poem. So I'm going to read you, before I finish with this subject. Here's the account from the 10th century. I love this kind of thing, that describes that yeshiva, the Metivta, where these guys were teaching, these Amoraim, these rabbis that appear all the time in the Talmud. I think it's really cool. We don't have a whole lot of accounts like this. I think this was written by a 10th century, one of the later Amoraim. I think his name was Shirira Gaon. He was the father. His son was also a Gaon, which makes me a little suspicious. But an account dating from the 10th century, describing the order of procedure and the differences in rank at the Kala, contain details that refer to the period of the Gaonim. These are the rabbis that come after the Amoraim. There's the Tanaim, the Amoraim, and then the Gaonim. The description given in the following gives the picture of the whole institution and the organization of these Babylonian academies. In the Kala months, that is in Elul at the close of the summer, and in Adar at the close of the winter, the disciples journey from their various places to the meeting. They lived all over, Babylonia. After having prepared in the previous 5 months, the treatise announced at the close of the preceding Kala by the head of the academy. So they prepared discussions. In Adar and Elul, they present themselves before the head, the Reish Metivta, who examined them upon this treatise. They sat in the following order of rank. Immediately next to the president is the first row, consisting of 10. 7 of these are heads of the Kala, Rishei Kala. 3 of them are called Chaverim, Chaverim, like pals, Hebrew. Each of the 7 Rishei Kala, heads of the Kala, has under 10. They're called Alufim. Aluf in modern Hebrew is a general, but they're like, entrusted people. The 70 Alufim, that's form the Sanhedrin. They make a Sanhedrin there, like a Jewish court, and are seated behind the above mentioned first row in 7 rows. Their faces are all turned toward the Reish Mativ, toward the head of the yeshiva. Behind them are seated, without special location, all the other members of the academy and their students. And then they examine in this way. Those that sit in the first row, they recite out aloud the subject, and the members of the remaining rows listen in silence. And when they reach a passage that requires discussion, they debate it among themselves, and the head silently takes notes of the subject of discussion. Then the head himself lectures. He lectures upon the treatise that they're talking about and adds something about these passages that he adds to the discussion. Sometimes he asks a question to those assembled as to how a certain halakha, certain law is to be explained. This must be answered only by the scholar who the Reish Mativta points out, who he identifies. And the Reish Yeshiva, he adds his own opinion. And when everything has been made clear, one of those in the first row stands up and delivers an address upon it, intended for the whole assembly, summing up the arguments on the themes that they've been considering. In the 4th week, so this Kala goes on for a month. In the 4th week of the Kala, the members of the Sanhedrin, as well as the other students, they are examined individually by the head, by the Reish Yeshiva Mativta, to prove their knowledge and capacity. And whoever is shown to have not prepared enough is castigated, reproved by the head of the yeshiva, and threatened to take his stipend away. They'll take his scholarship away. The questions that have been received from various quarters are also discussed at these Kala assemblies, and they are offered for a solution. And the head listens to the opinions of those present, and then the head makes a decision, which is immediately written down. At the end of the month, these answers are read aloud to the assembly, and they're signed by the head. So here you have an insight a little bit in how the Talmud was formed. they put out their arguments this way. Somebody wrote them down, and they made sure that they kept a record of it, and they thought about these things carefully. So I'm gonna unmute you now. But let me say one other thing, and then I'll be done. I was going to put this piece. I was going to, should I try again? I don't know. On the screen. I don't see it. I'm mad about that. I'm mad about that. I thought I would see it, but I don't see it. Do you see my screen now? Oh. Do you see that? Oh, sweet. Oh, this is great. You see that? Spectacular. Okay, so I'm going to do this real fast. So as we enter Leviticus here, see this here? That's what the first word of Leviticus looks like. Everybody see that? That's Vayikra. That's the name of the book of Leviticus. And it has, see that tiny little baby aleph there? Every Torah scroll has a baby aleph like that. So the aleph is not only, it's a silent letter, it's not only silent, it's small in the beginning of Vayikra, which is really curious because it means and God called. God called. So, oh my God. So the little aleph in the word Vayikra is always written smaller than the surrounding letters. So Rav Asi, he was a 3rd or 4th century, I think. Yeah. Oh, I have it in the poem here. So he's speaking to Moses, God's speaking to Moses here. So Rav Asi made this really interesting take on this crazy little aleph. Nobody knows. I mean, there's no particular reason why the aleph is small, but it's great for thinking. So when you call me, speak louder than you did with Moses, because here God's calling Moses, but not only does he call with a silent letter, the doggone letter is shrunk. It's not only silent, but it's tiny. So when you call me, speak louder than you did with Moses, I may not hear the diminished aleph. Your sound of affection. One of the commentators said it's a sign of affection that God used with Moses. But I'm listening with everything I have. I'm listening for the right word, the true story. Then Rav Asi said this. The reason why we always begin our study of Torah with the book of Leviticus, that's the first book that we introduce children to, is the principle is let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. In other words, children are the purest. What are they going to get first? The purest book. And this is the purest book of the Torah. Leviticus, it deals with the purest things. So said the wondrous Rav Asi, 3rd, 4th century. He was a student of Rav Shmuel. We were just talking about Shmuel. He was the guy who was the head of the Latifta in Nehardia. And Rav was the head of Surah. Rav and Shmuel, they were pals. Companion of Rav Ami, what they talked about, everything. Because that's what they did. They discussed everything. So there's all kinds of things about this aleph. Vayikar aleph also signifies, you know who was big into this was Borges. Borges, in the aleph, all things are contained in this thing. You know the Borges' story, the Aleph, El Aleph. Oh, it's a great story. It's only about 5 pages long. You know, all of the stories are really short. he finds this Aleph in a basement of a lousy poet in Argentina. He finds the Aleph, you know. It's really a great story. Borges was so into Kabbalistic stuff. So out of the Aleph, the tradition is in the mystical tradition, out of the Aleph comes everything. So here the Aleph is one, it's silent, it's one, it's the first letter. It contains all the other letters. According to Sefer Bahir, the early Jewish mystical text, the Aleph contains everything. So that's what Borges, he's in his story. That's what he finds in the basement of this lousy Argentinian poet. He finds the Aleph. It's so great. So anyway, that's a take on the Aleph, and also that it also can be understood as he came upon the Aleph. Vaikar without an Aleph means he happened upon. It could mean that he happened upon an Aleph. Maybe that's where Borges got the idea for his story. Just happened upon the Aleph. It could be understood that way. So I'm going to unmute you now and let you respond if however you like, and let's see if I can bring you back into. Uh-oh, what do I do here? I'm going to unmute you. Who wants to? Anybody? If you wave at me, I'll find you. I'll try it that way. Oh wait, let's see here. Oh, that's not working. Well, if you wave at me, I'm just going to unmute you, and you can jump in, and we'll just be careful. Anybody have a question, or I think I unmuted you.
You did.
Anybody have a question?
Actually, everybody can unmute themselves.
Oh,
If
okay.
they click down at the bottom and on the far left, you'll see a
Yeah.
little icon that says unmute with a red bar.
Yeah.
Through it, click on that, and then it'll say mute, and then you can speak.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive.
Thank you for this information. It's fascinating.
Beautiful.
We covered a lot of territory.
Yeah. Quite a ride.
Yeah. It was a nice flow. Starting with the new moon, and then I like how you tied everything into it.
Yeah, the moon. The moon is our image, you know. It's a profound image.
I'm still resonating with the whole sense of the darkness around the wick of the candle.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And my dad, who was a physicist, used to always say, nobody really understands combustion. This transformation from matter into energy and vice versa. The essential mystery of creation.
Interesting.
That's great.
That's what you're seeing in the darkness at the around the wick of the candle.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, well, I remember reading that in the Zohar, and I was just struck by that image so much. The dark candle. So I wrote a long meditation on it, looking at a candle, like a contemplation, and maybe we'll do it one night. It'll be interesting. I'll set a candle here, and I'll do it. It's long. It's like 3 or 4 pages. It's cool. It takes a while.
That's a good idea. We could each have our own candles.
Yeah, it
Oh,
would be
that would
really
be
cool. It would be a really interesting thing to do.
Will we do it next week?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great. I think it would be great.
I love it.
Oh, virtual meditation class.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
BYO candle.
It's long. I mean, it'll take 20 minutes.
We can handle that.
Yeah, we've got plenty of time on our hands.
Nobody's going anywhere.
That's right. Where you gotta be.
That's good.
Yeah, that would be a good follow-up to this.
Mhm.
You could remind us maybe. Do you have our emails? Can you like remind us stuff? How would that work?
I think I do actually.
And then maybe you could send us the stuff ahead of time. We could print it out.
Well, I would rather send it to you after, so you'll be surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't write on it.
Well, you shouldn't be writing. You should, you'll be watching.
You know, Sue, this is the way poetry was always meant to be perceived. Someone reading it and everybody else listening. So we're not good at that anymore. Maybe now we're gonna have to learn to be.
I sympathize with you, Susan, not having something to make notes on that would relate to it.
Well, that's how I learned, but for the meditation, I would not write. But for like what you did today, it would have been fun to have it to write on.
Yeah, I could have sent this to you easy.
So if it's something that we're not, then we can have it.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Okay.
I mean, then if someone comes in and you didn't know ahead of time, then they wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
I love it. Are you going to talk about the columns on either side? Jim?
Yeah, I could. Let's see. I'm looking at it. Can you still see
Oh.
it?
Yeah, you have it on the screen now.
You can see it?
Yeah.
So it says on the left column.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So supposedly, this is God calls to Moses with this small aleph. So naturally some of the commentators say, well, Moses was so humble, he was the greatest of the prophets, but he was also the most humble person. So that aleph represents how humble he was. Also, the aleph also signifies the one called, the aleph called.
Ah,
So aleph is, being the first letter, and all the other letters turn their faces away from the aleph. And this is a little midrash. All the other letters turned away from the aleph. Vayikar aleph, the aleph called, the one called, the aluf. It is concealed within each soul, within each person, has an aleph or an aluf, a grand master, a grand spirit within. And that spirit within calls each person to return. The voice that we carry within, that inner voice, is what's calling. The aleph, the internal aleph, is calling. The aleph within. And it's aloof, it's great. This sounds like Emerson,
I didn't get it. Is aloof is a Hebrew word?
Yeah. It's the same root, A-L-U-F.
But what does it mean? It means the great one?
The great, like it's used for general in modern Hebrew, and aloof is a general.
Oh, it's the one.
Also the one, same root.
Interesting.
Aleph. Yeah, not aloof like in English.
I understand.
So let's see on the other column. Rav Yaakov ben Asher, the Bala Turim, said, Vayikra used to indicate Vayikra is used to indicate that God specifically chose Moses and that there was a certain intimacy between the two. So when God called to him, and Moses, when he was transcribing the Torah, he was too humble to write it. So he put the aleph, he could himself he couldn't bring himself to write that God called him. So he reduced the aleph when Moses was transcribing the Torah. You know, it's funny little midrash. And also that Moshe Rabbeinu, he's like the aleph, he's small and humble. So he wrote Vayikar, happened by. So Vayikar can mean that God just happened by Moses, because there's a kara with a hey at the end and not an aleph. Kara can also mean just happened. So instead of God called to Moses, God kind of bumped into Moses as another demonstration of Moses's essential humility.
Hmm.
That's cute too. Also, here's something nice too on the bottom. This we also could do. The aleph, when a scribe makes an aleph, they make a vav and two yuds.
Mhm.
If you look at a Torah, you'll note, if you look on a scribal Torah, you'll notice that an aleph is made of a kind of a curvy vav and a yud up and a yud below. So aleph is also really interesting because, well, this gets pretty heavy here. So a yud also means hand. So it's like having a hand above and a hand below. And yeah, like you can become an aleph in posture. You're a vav, you're a sitting vav, and your hand above and your hand below. Your hand above is reaching for godliness, and the hand below is reaching for human beingliness, and you are the connector. And what is vav? Vav is and. You're the and. It's your body.
I love that.
Mhm.
So I have a meditation in posture, the aleph meditation. We actually recorded it.
Mhm.
Well,
We could try that. Oh, I'm sorry.
the shape of the aleph, it always also reminded me of the position, the yoga position, where you're separating earth and sky.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
where the connection between earth
Raise
and
one
sky.
hand up and another hand is reaching down, and your body is sort of angled.
Yeah,
You stretch, separating earth and sky.
you can
Well,
see the aleph that same way.
of is the connection between heaven and earth when I do that position.
Exactly.
I'm the connection, not the separation.
Well, both. You're in the middle.
Yeah,
But that's part of the paradoxes of all of the metaphors that we've had today. You know, the light contains the dark, and the moon is a continuum between large and small, so it contains itself in all elements. And you know, there's something concealed in all of us. I mean, there's this. It's all a continuum. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's a great word.
So we can see you now scrolling.
yeah. I'm looking for. I recorded this aleph thing in a song, and I thought maybe I had it here, but I think it's in Dropbox. And I don't know how to get into that. So I'm gonna play something else. See if you can hear this. I don't know how this is going to work, but there is another piece on here from the new recordings. I don't know what we're going to do with them now, but we have all these new recordings that are done. They're really beautiful. We were going to roll them out, and then all this stuff happened. So I'll give you, I don't know. Oh, here's a good one. See if you can hear this. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yep.
How God created the world, like an architect, checking the drawings. I built it with substance and form. Like a poet, I pored over scrolls until words scampered from the page. Like a designer, I took the supernal forms and built them into my creation. Like a composer,
I made a chorus for sleep, also something hidden from silence. I don't know how I created it. Until we measure up. There was a pillow of comfort to fall back into, and determination to fix it.
The quality isn't really great for us to hear. There's probably a way to do it, though.
Yeah. Now I don't know what to do.
It's a brave new world, Jim.
I can't get out.
You can see what you're doing.
I can't stop.
We're in a loop. We can't get out of here either. We're here.
Oh no, here's another piece. I don't know what to do now. All right, I think we have to end because I don't know what to do.
Okay.
Well,
We'll see you with our candles next week.
Yeah, it's great seeing everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, kids. Hey, thanks for coming out, and I really appreciate it. I don't know what to do.
Thank you.
we'll all get much better at this.
Or
I mean,
not.
the fact that I'm on this at all, this is in the minor miracle department.
Your miracle, I was just gonna say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks,
Thank you.
All right, I'm getting out.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks for coming.
I
Bye.
can't believe.
I don't know how to get